name's Liam. I've lived in Pinesboro my whole life. A tiny town, tucked between dense forests and endless cornfields. In Pinesboro, everybody knows everybody, which means secrets don't stay hidden for long. Well, except for one. Coach Ray Watson, our school bus driver, was more than a man. He was a legend. In the late 60s, he was the quarterback who brought our high school its first and only state championship. The dusty old trophy still sits in a glass case near the school gym, with a black and white photo of him smiling, his arm slung around his teammates. Over the years, though, life hadn't been kind for old Ray. The whispers started when his wife cheated, and then left him, taking their 2 kids. His drinking and drugging got worse, and there were rumors he got fired from the mill after a fight with his boss. But when Pinesboro High offered him the school bus driving gig for whatever reason, people said it was his chance to turn things around. He even started going to AA meetings twice a week and attending treatment. That's the thing about small towns. We're quick to forgive, maybe too quick. But nothing could have prepared us for what happened that Thursday morning. It started like any other day. The November air was crisp and freezing as I waited at the bus stop with my little sister, Emma. We could see the headlights of the yellow bus cutting through the fog before it lumbered to a stop in front of us. Coach Ray was in his usual spot, his massive hands gripping the wheel. "Morning, kids," he said, his voice gravelly but warm. We climbed aboard, and I noticed something off right away. His eyes were bloodshot, his shirt wrinkled and untucked. His knuckles were white on the steering wheel. The ride was quieter than usual. Most mornings, the bus was filled with chatter and laughter, but today there was a heavy tension in the air. Coach Ray kept muttering under his breath. At one point, I thought I heard him say something about liars, but he was mumbling nonsense. We pulled into the school parking lot, but instead of stopping by the main doors, the bus kept going. Coach, you missed the drop-off," said Danny, a senior who always sat in the front. Coach Ray didn't respond. The bus turned sharply, tires screeching as it veered toward the football field. "Coach, where are we going?" I asked, my voice trembling. He slammed on the brakes, and the bus came to a jarring stop near the bleachers. Turning to face us, his face was a mask of rage and despair. "You kids don't know what it's like," he growled. "You don't know how it feels to give everything to this town and have it spit in your face." The bus fell silent. Someone whimpered. "I was the man," he said, pacing the aisle. "They cheered my name. They said I'd never fail. But where are they now, huh? Where were they when I needed them?" His voice cracked and tears streamed down his face. "We're just kids, Coach," Emma whispered, clutching my arm. His eyes snapped to her, wild and unfocused. "Exactly. Just kids. You don't understand yet, but you will." Meanwhile, word had spread that something was wrong. The school went into lockdown, and the principal called the police. We could see police cars pulling into the parking lot from the bus windows. Coach Ray saw them too. "So, they're sending the cavalry, huh?" He laughed, a chilling, hollow sound. "Figures. Always been a bunch of wussies." Then he pulled something from under his seat, a silver gun. "All right, listen up," he barked. "Nobody moves. Nobody gets off this bus. I just need to say a few things." He didn't finish the sentence, but the look in his eyes said enough. Time stretched, each second feeling like an eternity. My heart was pounding so hard, I thought it might burst. I kept glancing at the emergency exit in the back, wondering if we could make it. Danny, who always acted tough, was shaking like a leaf. "We've got to do something," he whispered. I nodded. "But we have to be smart." Outside, the police were trying to negotiate. We could hear them shouting through a megaphone, asking Coach Ray to let us go. "You think they care about you?" he yelled back. "They're just doing their jobs, same as I was. Nobody cares." While he was distracted, I motioned to Emma and Danny. We moved as quietly as we could toward the back of the bus. The plan was simple: open the emergency exit and get as many kids out as possible. But just as I reached for the lever, Coach Ray turned. "Hey!" he roared, charging toward us. In the chaos, I yanked the lever, and the emergency door flew open. Kids started pouring out, screaming and running toward the police. Coach Ray grabbed my arm, his grip like a vice. "Where do you think you're going?" he snarled. "Let him go," Emma shouted, picking up a fire extinguisher from under a seat and smashing it into his side. He let out a grunt and released me, stumbling back. We didn't stop to see what would happen next. We bolted off the bus and into the safety of the waiting officers. The standoff ended an hour later. Coach Ray surrendered, dropping the gun and walking off the bus with his hands up. They led him away in handcuffs, his face red, his eyes filled with tears. Like all the fight had drained out of him. The town was never the same. After that, Coach Ray's fall from grace was the kind of thing that shakes a place like Pinesboro to its core. For months, it was all anyone could talk about. Some people blamed the school for hiring him in the first place. I know I did. Others said we should have seen the warning signs earlier. As for me, I couldn't stop thinking about the look in his eyes that morning. The anger, the pain, the hopelessness, and how he kept muttering nonsense. It made me wonder how many others in this town were just barely holding it together, hiding their struggles behind forced smiles and small talk. Pinesboro used to feel safe, like nothing bad could ever happen here. But now I know better. Even in the quietest of towns, darkness has a way of creeping in. It was almost 5 p.m., and the school was quiet in a way that always felt strange at this time. Something about an empty school, when it's dark out, always gave me the creeps. Math club had run long again, and most of the other students had already cleared out. I didn't mind. Usually, I enjoyed the quiet moments when it felt like the school belonged only to me. I come from a small town, so I preferred to keep this story anonymous and change all of the facts and details. As I was leaving, I walked past the history wing. I noticed Mr. Kavanaugh's classroom door was still open, the warm glow of his desk lamp spilling into the dim hallway. I paused, debating whether to say hello or keep walking. "Jessica," his voice cut through the quiet, making my decision for me. "Come here for a moment, will you?" I stepped into the doorway, clutching my backpack strap. "Hi, Mr. Kavanaugh. Did you need something?" He looked up from his papers, smiling. "Just wanted to tell you that your essay on the Battle of Stalingrad was outstanding. Truly impressive work, young lady." "Thank you," I said, feeling my cheeks flush slightly. I always worked hard in his class. History was my favorite subject, after all, but his praise still made me nervous. "Come in. Don't be a stranger," he said, gesturing toward the chair across from his desk. "Let's chat for a minute." I hesitated but stepped inside, perching on the edge of the chair. The room felt too warm, too quiet, with just the faint hum of the heating vents breaking the silence. "You've got a real gift," he said, leaning back in his chair with his legs open and studying me in a way that made me feel strangely exposed. "It's rare to see a student as engaged and intelligent as you," his eyes locking on mine. "Thanks," I mumbled, unsure where to look. You know, he continued, his tone dropping into something softer, students like you often don't realize how much potential they have. You could do amazing things if you let me show you the way. His words hung in the air, and I shifted uncomfortably, the weight of his gaze making my skin crawl. Well, I really like history, I said, trying to steer the conversation back to something safe. That much is obvious, he said with a small laugh. You're far ahead of your peers. Honestly, I feel like we connect on a different level than I do with most students. Don't you think? The question caught me off guard. My throat tightened and I shrugged awkwardly. I guess so? Trying to keep the status quo. He leaned forward slightly, his elbows on the desk, closing the already narrow space between us. It's important to have someone who really sees you, Jessica. Someone who understands what you're capable of. I understand everything about you. At this point, I was getting terrified. This man was older than my dad. Why was he trying to do this? I glanced at the door, my fingers tightening around the strap of my bag. He seemed like he was about to say something else when I said, "Well, I should probably get going," I said quickly, standing up. "Oh, we were just getting started," he said, his smile ear to ear as his eyes followed me to the door. "But remember, for you and you only, my door is always open, for anything." He then made the slightest wink. My stomach literally dropped to the floor. Okay, thanks," I muttered, hurrying out of the room. The hallway felt colder than before, and I wrapped my arms around myself as I practically jogged toward the exit. My mind raced, replaying the conversation and picking apart the things he'd said, the way he'd said them. By the time I reached the parking lot, my heart was pounding, and I couldn't shake the unease that had settled deep in my stomach. Something about the whole encounter felt wrong. I pulled out my phone, texting my mom to let her know I was on my way home. As I walked into the fading evening light, I promised myself I wouldn't stay late at school again. I sometimes look my old history teacher up to see if he's graduated to making a move on his impulses. Nothing yet. These days, our kids don't have it as good as we used to. Sure, school sucked, but at least we went on field trips. Most field trips were to ordinary places, of course, like the public library or to a play, but our field trip to OMSI in Portland was anything but ordinary. My classmates and I were psyched out of our minds. Most of us had never been to a museum that big before. Most of us had never been to a museum at all. The place was famous for its interactive science exhibits, but for me, that day became infamous for something a little darker. It started like any other field trip, I guess. We arrived mid-morning, our teachers handing out bright orange lanyards with emergency contact cards clipped to them. I wore mine proudly. The museum was a hive of activity. Kids running to exhibits, chaperones trying to herd us like cats. I could tell the museum employees were over us. By noon, we'd been through the planetarium and the earthquake simulator. It was around then that I saw him. He was standing near the edge of a darkened exhibit hall, a tall man in an army green jacket. He had a long gray beard, but his beard looked oddly fake. He wasn't a chaperone, and he definitely didn't look like staff. All I know is I kept catching him looking at me. "Hey, kiddo," he muttered, almost too softly to hear over the noise of the museum. His voice was gravelly, like someone who smoked a pack of cigs every day. "You dropped something." I looked down, but nothing. When I looked back up, he was gone, his figure disappearing into the shadowy corner of the exhibit hall. Something about him made my stomach churn, but I brushed it off. The museum was crowded. He was probably just some weirdo passing through. Then during the lunch break, I wandered off. My group was eating in the cafeteria, but I was restless, eager to see more of the museum. Remember, I was just a kid. I told myself I'd be back before anyone noticed I was gone. Big mistake. I walked back toward the turbulent landscapes exhibit, its dim lighting giving the room an almost dreamlike quality. That's when I saw the man again. He was standing by a display case, watching me. Again. "You following me?" he asked, his voice louder this time, cutting through the hum of the exhibits. "No," I said quickly, but my voice cracked. "You sure about that?" He took a step closer, his heavy boots echoing on the polished floor. "You here alone, aren't you?" Something about the way he said it made my skin crawl. I turned to leave, but as I did, I felt his hand brush my shoulder. "Wait," he started, but I bolted. I ran through the museum, weaving between exhibits and ducking past groups of visitors. When I finally stopped, my chest heaving, I realized I had no idea where I was. The exhibits were gone, replaced by dark hallways and storage rooms. The air smelled damp and stale, and the noise faded into eerie silence. I tried retracing my steps, but the hallways seemed to twist and shift, leading me deeper into the labyrinth. And then I heard it, a soft shuffle, like boots dragging across the floor. Come out," the man's voice echoed, sending a chill down my spine. "You can't hide forever." My heart pounded as I ducked into a nearby room. It was filled with disassembled exhibits. Half-built displays, mannequins missing limbs, and dusty crates stacked to the ceiling. I crouched behind a crate, trying to steady my breathing. The shuffling grew louder, closer. "Come on out," the man called. His voice was calm, almost playful. "I just want to show you something," he chuckled. I pressed my hand against my mouth, stifling a sob. The door creaked open. I peeked through a gap in the crates and saw his shadow stretching across the floor. "I saw you come in here," he said, stepping further into the room. "Don't make me find you, little boy." My mind raced. I spotted a vent near the floor, its cover slightly ajar. Without thinking, I crawled toward it, trying to move as silently as possible. Just as I squeezed into the vent, I heard him curse under his breath. The crate I'd been hiding behind toppled over with a crash. "I know you're here." I scrambled through the vent, the metal edges scraping my knees and elbows. The tight space amplified every sound, and I could hear him banging on the vent cover, his voice growing angrier. Finally, I saw light ahead. I pushed through the vent cover and tumbled into a brightly lit hallway, gasping for air. A security guard spotted me almost immediately. "Andrew? What are you doing back here?" he asked, rushing toward me. I couldn't speak. I was shaking. Too hard. Within minutes, the museum was in chaos. Police officers swarmed the building, and my parents arrived frantic and pale. I tried to tell them about the man, but no one seemed to believe me. The museum staff claimed there were no unauthorized individuals in the building. Of course, the cameras didn't seem to be working in the area that I was in. For 6 hours, I was gone, and to this day, I don't know how I found my way back. But I'll never forget the man in the army jacket. What if he had found me? Why did he want me so badly? Thinking about it gives me instant goosebumps. OMSI is a place of wonder for most people. For me, it's a place of nightmares. And somewhere, in the back of my mind, I can still hear his voice saying, "You can't hide forever."